We are joined by Canadian judoka and PhD student Antoine Bouchard. How are you doing?
Pretty good, thank you.
Looking forward to chatting with you. It's been a while. Last time we did this was a couple of years ago, I believe.
Yeah,
So
probably like during COVID.
yes, COVID. Oh my goodness, bye bye COVID. Thanks for joining us here. I have a set of questions that are mainly focused on training and a few, I guess, science related themes for us to explore. But first off, I want you to give us an update regarding your most recent tournaments in Turkey and Georgia. If you can just tell us about the experience overall.
Well, sadly, it didn't go well because I basically just came back a couple of months ago from another major surgery for my shoulder. So I had a surgery first in 2019, and because it kept popping out like dislocated shoulder, and I came back and it was holding pretty well up until maybe October to 2021, where it came out once and then it started to be more fragile, kept popping out, so I had no other choices but to have another surgery. So I've been slowly getting back into it. I did two tournaments also in February, which were really like to see where I was. I was pretty, I still I was pretty confident going into those two tournaments because I was feeling good, knowing no pain for my shoulders, and I was getting back into shape. First tournament in Georgia, I was taking one of the local guys, like an up and coming junior. I think now he's senior. The fight was really, I'm gonna say it like this. It was pretty weird because we were there like respecting each other a lot at the beginning, and none of us really engaged. So they decided to give us early shit like penalties, so one and then two Shidos. And then okay, I try not to criticize refs because obviously we have a job to do and they have a job to do. But we do like one or two exchange, and they gave me I'm gonna say questionable Shido. I think maybe a combination of our fight being first round, so very early in the day they wanted it to be done, or maybe it's a Georgian guy, or maybe because there are two Shidos, so they decided to end the fight early. At the end of the day, I could have probably do more to try to throw, but it is what it is. And then second tournament, I fought also an up and coming town from Morocco. Thought I was doing pretty well on the fight, dominating on the grip. Almost during one of my early attacks, was going pretty well. At some point, maybe because it's been a while since I did a lot of tournaments, so I got a little bit impatient, didn't attack, and I got countered sadly for Ippon. Overall, I mean, in terms of results, pretty bad. In terms of setting myself back on the field, it's getting there. I know it. Just I need to be patient. Oh, you're on mute.
Of course, of course that had to happen. Sorry about that. I was just going to say I think this is you've had four tournaments this year
Yes.
already.
Yeah.
I think you're Bulgaria and Israel as well. And I mean that's pretty busy, is it not? Considering like they were going into the fourth month of the year. It sounds like it's going to be a busy year for you, obviously.
Well, yeah, and also I'm leaving for Dominican Republic in less than 2 weeks, so
Right.
it's
Wow.
already my
Wow.
fifth tournament.
Wow.
So yeah, it is busy, but when you want to come back on the circuit, you gotta like do like a lot of tournaments to get those matches and get back the experience.
For sure. Now, I'm curious to know, how the heck do you make time for training when you're a PhD student? I find that incredible, the level of discipline one must have to be organized. You know what I mean? To do your studies, which require a lot, I would obviously, and also to train and so on. So remind us again what sort of research you're doing, and what the journey is like to become a PhD, a Dr. Antoine Bouchard?
So I'm working on the post-translational modification of proteins. So I'm working on one specifically. Basically, proteins, once they are synthesized, they can be modified through multiple ways. And I'm working on building some sort of tools to help study some of those post-translational modification. That's how I can basically summarize it.
Fair enough.
And what's the pathway? I mean, actually, what I did is I started my master's, and after 1 year, I decided to jump straight to PhD. And it's been a little bit over a year, and what it is, it's a little bit of the same. A lot of research, very few classes. I have, I think, two in my whole 4 years that I need to take. But it's a lot of research. It's almost like having a full-time job when you think about it, because you start your day at whatever time, then sometimes you have short days, but sometimes you have also longer days. So yeah, like it's almost having a full-time plus my other full-time job being judo. I think it's a lot of juggling, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah, it sounds like it, man, and it's incredible, and it's again, I think it requires a lot of discipline and work ethic. But on that note, we're going to jump right into the set of questions that I have for you. The first one is, what are the most effective training methods for high-performance judo athletes, and how do these differ from those used for athletes in other combat sports?
Well, that's already a tricky question to start with. Okay, first off, like I'm gonna say for most of your questions, like I'm not claiming to be any sort of expert. I think most of the answer I'm gonna give are gonna be based on personal experience,
Sure.
Some readings that I did, and talking with other people that are more competent than me in most of these areas. So as for your question, what are the most effective methods for high performance judo athletes? Well, it's interesting because there's not necessarily an optimal method. I think you travel a little bit around the world, and everybody's gonna have their approach. Like I'm thinking about some people would be maybe like focusing a little bit more on physical preparation to have like better cardio, better physical condition, versus some other people are going to be more axing on judo. And that's because judo is a very complex sport. You have the physical aspect where you need to be in shape, you can be strong, you can have a lot of endurance to win your matches. So there's a lot of weight just on the physical aspect. There's also the tactical aspect. So when you're going to fight a lefty or righty, if you want to play the Shido game, so the guy is strong, so you're going to try to be more defensive and wait for your opportunity. And there's also the technical aspect in judo, which implies all the techniques where you can throw. As far as training goes, I think there's for other combat sport, I think in a way there's some parallels that could be made for with wrestling, for example, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu wrestling, because I mean obviously judo is very similar to it. We try to throw whoever we fight, and at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu the groundwork is very similar. But I think there's not necessarily an very optimal. I think it's just whatever, it's a little bit implemented in the judo culture or of each country. And what's more specific to judo is is the technical aspect, because you take a sport like wrestling, where if you throw your opponent, you score a point. Where in judo, if you throw the guy on the back, you win, or if you submit him, you win automatically. Right. So I think that's the biggest aspect. Is you could be very well prepared. You could be the strongest guy, the fastest guy. You can still get surprised by someone very technical and lose your match in 5 seconds. So I think that's what's so particular about judo.
Now, just to follow up on that, how can sports scientists, nutritionists, and physiotherapists work together to prevent and manage injuries for judo athletes, particularly those competing internationally like yourself?
Well, I think you didn't list actually the most important person, which is yourself. I think one part that's very important is to be able to listen to your body, what people are advising to you, and to build on the relationships you have with people. Example, you talk with your coach, you say, oh, tonight I'm not feeling it, I'm pretty tired, I have a tough week. So he's gonna be able to adapt yourself. And the coach is also someone very important that you're gonna need to talk to, because he's the link between all of those areas. An example would be like for us, the three biggest aspects that I can think of would be nutritionist, physical preparation, and physiotherapist. So the coach is going to be the one to really like work with the rest of the team. He's going to be like the one doing the passing messages with you in depth. And as far as what each specific roles that you mentioned could do, let's start with nutritionists. I think they can really start by advising methods for optimal recovery after training. Pre-training food are also another idea. Supplements for physical training. Ours also do blood testing. We have, I think every 3 or 4 months we have a blood test so that she can check levels of nutrients to see if there's any issue. Markers of fatigue, bad recovery, bad life habits. For physiotherapists, of course, treating injuries, the recurring ones, the minor one that can become worse, the major ones, following up on rehab, like giving you specific warm-up programs. There's a lot that she can do. And sports scientists, for us, it's mostly a sport preparator. It's adapting trainings based on the cycle that you're in before, after tournaments. There's also monitoring how you're performing. If he sees, for example, your bench typically is 150 kilos max and you can only bench 120, maybe you should get the red flag and say, okay, let's take it easy today. It seems like you're tired. Maybe get a rest for this morning, do something lighter. So it's really based on yourself, how you're going to react and what they can see. It's an everyday, like everyone can do their little part to really avoid major injuries.
I guess we'll go back to the topic of injuries later on in this conversation. I have this annoying question here because I don't know if it's annoying, but I'll ask it anyway. Are there any innovative new training tactics or technologies that can be used to enhance judo athletes' performance? And what are the benefits and limitations of these approaches?
Well, okay. When I thinking about this, I think the word innovative is pretty loaded. Yeah, because I mean, let's say we compare to what was being done 5 years ago. I don't think a lot has changed, but I think let's say in the last 20, 25 years, there's a lot that has been brought to the table to optimize, it could be training, it could be performance, it could be programs. So there's a lot. I thought about 4 of them that we do every now and then. So first one, of course, is video. It could be good for 2 reasons. Mostly when you're in a tournament, you can know who you're going to face. You can study him, strength, weaknesses, and elaborate a game plan.
Right.
And it can also be good to watch your old fights or yourself when you're training. I know some people at judo are filming themselves during training sessions to see what they did good and what they do poorly, for example. But it can really improve what you're doing on the tactical point and on the technical point. I don't think there's a lot of downside to it. Another one that I thought that I we don't use it in Montreal, but I saw the country using it, is those reaction training lights
Oh yeah.
that,
Yeah.
like you touch,
Sure.
and it's good for physical training. It's good, and it's good also for working reflexes.
Hmm.
It like in terms of judo, is it like gonna improve your judo? Of course not, but it's still. I thought it was a pretty like quote unquote innovative. Heart monitors, we use them a lot, to build programs. For example, you're on the mat, they want you to work hard. They say try to reach your 90% heart rate through this fight. And that's how they can check that you're doing the right training. And the
Mm.
last one is like just like all those testing measuring devices in gyms to measure like your max strength, your explosion, your power. So all of those like little tools, they're not like revolutionary, but I
Sure.
think you take all of them together and there are a lot of easy ways to optimize your training.
For sure. No, I appreciate that. It's interesting because in other fields, now not so much on, I guess, maybe not sports related, when you look at like, the idea of using virtual reality or augmented reality, as a mechanism for learning, right? And discovery. Like I don't know how much of that has been explored for combat sports per se. Like
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
I know that for Taekwondo, for example, they've gamified Taekwondo now, where basically you're essentially playing a video. It's an e-sport now. It's
Okay.
essentially playing a video game. But I was just curious to see if there was something along those lines, if it's mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, training and so on, because it's very interesting to see the potential in technology, maybe not for high level sport, maybe not. But I was just that's why I threw in innovative, and I could see how that's kind of a loaded sort
Well,
of.
the way you're talking, like the way you're talking right now, I think, like these tools, virtual reality for combat sport like boxing, for example, could be really good. You can probably build a certain program and it would be fully automated
Mhm.
and you would need to dodge or punch. And I think that could be great. I think for grappling sports, it would be a little bit more complex just
Right.
because I think there's more involved than just like I think it would be harder to build, and
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No.
but
Absolutely. Yeah.
probably at some point we're going to be there.
For sure. Who knows? Who knows? But it goes to show as you were saying from the top, how complicated the sport is, or complex the
Yeah,
sport of judo is. For a variety of reasons. Obviously, it being a grappling sport, but there's a lot more on the technical side. Now I'm going to shift over to the topic of concussions, because head you know concussions are very common in various sports, and even people who don't even play any sports or train, may have experienced concussions. So I kind of want an explanation on what is a concussion, what are the long-term effects of repeated concussions on judo athletes, how can coaches and athletes work together to prevent and manage concussions in training and competition. And I know you're not a concussion expert, but I thought I just throw this in here. I don't mean to concuss you with the question.
well, I think what a concussion is, I can summarize it pretty easily. It's basically when your brain or like you have a head shot and the brain is gonna go and hit the cranium, so the inside of the head, I guess.
Mm.
So, and that's going to cause a lot of symptoms. So there's headache, there's light sensitivity, there's nausea. So there's a bunch of them. Being dizzy also could be another one. In terms of long-term effects of repeated concussion, I am I'm going to say a little bit familiar. I think the one that I know and that everybody knows is the lasting concussion effects. So you're gonna have migraines more often. You're gonna have sometimes a vertigo, and you're going to be more sensitive to other concussions because your brain is going to be bruised. It's going to be a little bit more like it's going to be more likely that you get a concussion.
Right.
And as far as how to prevent concussions, I think there are two ways. First one, of course, is through good education of athletes. And it starts at a young age, learning how to fall properly. That's the key one. Accepting falls or throws when you're training, that's also another one. If you try to always dodge attacks and you flip in the air and then you take the throw poorly, that's how you can get injured. So accepting the throw is pretty important. Sadly, concussions can still happen even if you apply those tips or like those, if you do everything properly. So I think the most important part is to follow like first you say that you have a concussion, you get diagnosed, and it's to follow the protocol. I know it's like, I think everybody hates the concussion protocol because it's long. It can take a month, 2 months, even 3 months if it's a big one and you try to come back too quickly because you're gonna have symptoms. But I think it's really important to try to limit those long-lasting effects because it is a pretty serious trauma that you have when you have a concussion. So doing the right rehab, it's the same as when you have a surgery, right? If you have a surgery and they say 4 months off, you take the 4 months off, you come back strong. If you come back earlier, you're at risk of re-injury. So same thing for concussion.
Now, how when you, in terms of within the community, how open are people to concussion awareness? Like it's you know, and I ask that because obviously you're talking about how, you know, the protocol states it takes, you know, 1 to up to 3 months, and I mean, if you're a high performance competitive athlete, I mean that's a lot of time, obviously away, right, from training and competing, so on and so forth. How open, and I ask this because I always hear stories about this is in other sports, contact and combat sports, about how some people just get back on there. You know, they you know what I'm saying? Like oh yeah, I'm shook up a little bit, but they you know, take a week off and then they jump back in there. So I guess the question is that awareness piece and that engagement piece, how well known is it within the community, and do people openly talk about it as far as do coaches, and it doesn't have to be at the international level, it could be at the club level as well, I imagine. What's your experience with that?
Well, I think like I can see like in the last 10 years, I saw really a difference in terms of like how people treat concussion. At first, without saying that people were not taking it seriously, you could see that it wasn't taken as seriously as it should. A lot of people brushing it off or saying, oh, like, you know, probably have a small concussion, it's okay, I'll go back. But I think more and more with everything we hear about lasting effects and with like the proper education that both athletes and coaches have received, as well as being followed carefully by physiotherapists and by doctors, I think it is something that we are all aware of and that everybody's trying to take seriously. And yeah, I think it's been moving in the right direction, I think, fortunately.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I would agree with that in terms of a lot of the communication, a lot of the content that we see, as far as and a lot of the conversation along the lines of traumatic brain injuries and concussions and so on. I'll move on to the next question in regards to cross training. How does cross training in other sports benefit judo athletes' development and performance? What are the keys? What are the key advantages of this approach?
Well, I think let's start just with high performance. I think if you pick, let's say tomorrow morning, I want to do another sport to try to complement judo. Yeah, I could do, for example, I don't know, hockey for fun, and that would help the mental aspect of the game a lot because, you know, it gives you another sport to relax that you can do more for fun. So that's one of the big advantage of just doing another sport. I know some people on the team really like biking, and it's a passion of theirs, and but just for fun, and
Right.
it helps relieve a lot of stress just by doing another sport. But if you want to have a more sport specific approach, I think for judo, two sports that I can think about, and I mentioned them earlier, would be jujitsu and wrestling. I think there are elements in those sports that even if you do for fun, can be take and brought to your judo, the ground or the standing judo.
Right.
So I think that's and those sports also have their own. It's true, like they're going to work different parts of bodies, for example. So maybe muscles that have not are not used a lot in judo are going to be used in other sports, and that's another big advantage of it. And I think just in terms of development for kids, it's one of the most important thing to do to have as many sports as possible. Multiple reasons, as I said, the mental aspect. You just the, being invested in only one sport can bring a lot of stress. So having
Sure.
this variety is going to help a lot. Fundamental movements. There are some, for example, gymnastics is probably the greatest sports to put your kid in for
Right.
if you want to, because it opens so many doors after if you want to keep doing gymnastics, but also it brings uh, this knowledge when you're in the air of how to twist and how to move. And for judo, actually, it's a really good thing to have once you're like 10 years old, you can like learn all of this. So yeah, I think all of those like little elements, mental aspect, physical aspect, developing new skills, it's all part of like why it's a good thing to try other sports. It can be competitive or not, just yeah, trust me.
Interesting. It's interesting that you mention as a high performance athlete that these other sports that folks engage in are for just to de-stress, right? They're just to chill out and for the mental health, the benefits. It's interesting to hear that. I wasn't expecting that one, but
Well, it's funny because a couple of weeks ago, I started to play just hockey in gymnasium just for fun on Saturdays, and it's fun because I'm a very competitive guy, so of course I want to win, but it's just because there's not as much pressure or as much
right.
expectations. I guess it's a different reality, but it also helps to just like relieve me myself from a lot of stress.
For sure. No, it makes total sense. It's just fun, right? There's no expectation. There's
Yeah.
no all these other big things that are at play. I'm going to move on to this next question here regarding chokes in judo. What are the risks associated with choking techniques in judo, and how can coaches and athletes ensure that these techniques are practiced safely and effectively? What is the difference between an air choke and a blood choke? And how do these techniques affect the body physiologically?
Well, so I think both types of choke, so it can be blood or oxygen, are gonna lead to the same are gonna have the same consequences in terms of physiology, and it's gonna be depriving your brain from oxygen because blood is when it goes to the brain is responsible to transfer, of course, oxygen throughout the body, and it's going to give oxygen to the brain, take back the CO2, and then it's going to be taken out of the body. So by blocking the blood flow, you're stopping this process, which this is why there's a choke. The other one being the air choke. It's going to be the same idea, except earlier in the process. It's when you breathe in, you take the oxygen and then goes to your lung through the blood. So it's really the same, the consequence, the ultimate goal is going to be the same, and it's to deprive oxygen to the body and the brain. So, and in terms of I'm gonna like put
The
a
risks?
disclaimer that I'm
Sure.
gonna put a disclaimer that it's not always the case in terms of risks.
Mm.
I think if you're in controlled environment, they're very minimal. Of course, you don't want to do chokes when you're a kid, when you have like known predispositions or like heart problems, for example.
Right.
But I think in controlled environments, if you have learned how to tap, like there's no problem. And once in a while, it happens that you can pass out because either you didn't want to tap or the choke was 1 second uh, too long.
Right.
So what are the consequences? I think, again, if you're in a controlled environment, for example, in tournaments where it's going to happen a lot, the referee's going to see that you're out and he's going to ask the guy to let go. The guy's going to let go. And naturally, with the blood coming back in your body, the oxygen coming back in your body and giving it back to the brain, there shouldn't be a long-lasting effect. Of course, if you choke someone for 5 minutes after he's unconscious, then that's where the problem is. But in the sport context, I don't think there are a lot of risks associated to choking techniques. And of course, that goes, again, a lot of problems can be solved through proper education of athletes, coaches explaining why it's important to tap or
Sure.
so to quit when they are under this types of technique. And that's why, another thing that I just thought about, in Canada, if you are junior or I think junior, but for sure U18 and under, if you are choked out, so if you don't tap, you're disqualified from the tournament.
Wow.
Because they want to teach you actually that it's not a good thing, and they want to teach you that you should be tapping instead of just laying yourself down.
Great rule. I think that's a very important thing that needs to be taught. I have a follow-up for you in regards to just one of the questions I've been getting, like, first of all, I think I know of a few incidents, not within judo, but other grappling-based sports where some people, I guess, maybe were not trained properly. I don't know. I don't know how to frame it, but whereas they were choking and the person on the receiving end of being choked was not was basically in a particular hold for an extended period of time. They didn't pass out or anything, but in the end, it kind of led to them having some issues. I won't get into it, but basically, like, he could have I imagine this person could have just tapped, but it was a long Niwaza session where they were in a choke for an extended period of time. They could still breathe and everything, but eventually it kind of had like a mini stroke, I guess. Anyways, yeah, I don't, yeah, I'll skip on that.
That's an unfortunate outcome, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, for the record, I think there might have been something else going on. Who knows? It probably wasn't necessarily, it's a combination of things. Usually these things are not, there's.
Well, I can see why if you're being choked for 2, 3, 4 minutes, even if you're still able to breathe and you're still conscious, it can probably like cause some pressure in the head or stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, that could be a risk. I didn't think about it that way. I know in judo, for example, it's mostly going to be in tournaments that you're going to be facing those problems. One of the key aspects is that if the referee thinks that there's no progress, he's going to say mate, both athletes are going to stand up. Or if he sees that the choke is good, most of the time the athlete is going to tap. So yeah, again, it's pretty unfortunate. Right. Hopefully, like, it's not happening often.
Yeah, no, we don't hear much about, like, it's not like there's a lot of articles and stories, and I'm sure that this data is being collected maybe at the tournament level, but I'm talking more at a club, like recreational level. Sometimes you kind of wonder how much training. Anyways, these are different sports, so I don't want to get into it too much. Mm-hmm. But I do have a follow-up for you, actually. In fact, when it comes to chokes and even arm bars and in judo, sometimes, and I got this question from someone who sent me a bunch of clips of situations where like basically people are not tapping out to an arm bar and not choking out or not tapping out to a choke on time. They're essentially like on their way out. They're, you know what I mean? They're about to pass out. One of the questions that was asked was, why isn't the referee jumping? like you know in mixed martial arts where the referees jump in and they know like, okay, look, this arm is going to be hyperextended, or you know, like there comes a point where you kind of you in other sports you see more of that engagement from the ref, whereas in some clips that we've seen in judo, like it's very common to see someone literally go limp. Not very common. It happens, right? It happens.
Yeah, it happens.
So my question for you as a competitor, what's that all about? I guess is that a sort of mentality of competitors who just, you know, they're in a fight, right? This is not mixed martial arts, but they're fighting, they're giving their all within the context of judo. They don't want to tap. You know what I mean? Like they're competing. Is that at play? Is it a combination of the choke got applied quickly enough, strongly enough that I just passed out, which is probable? Well, how do you assess that?
Well, I think there's a little bit of everything you said. Of course, sometimes the choke can be so well put right at the beginning that you can pass out like almost instantly. For arm bars, it takes a little bit more, I think. But let's stay on chokes first. I think just not tapping can be both a personal, like based on the personality of the person, or also cultural differences in terms of countries.
Right.
So, and you know, like some countries, like, you know, that have less opportunities to compete internationally, maybe their mentality is going to be, well, that's my only chance. I really gotta like fight until the end and I can't quit. For arm bars, personally, as soon as the arm bar is like well applied, like tap, I don't want to break an arm. Chokes, you can kind of like try to sneak out a little bit more because you have more time. But an arm bar, it's like no way I'm gonna like risk 6 or 8 weeks of like being in a cast doing nothing just to maybe get out.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that other aspect that you mentioned, that cultural out perspective or angle, I didn't think of that's totally true, right? For some folks, maybe this is their only opportunity, and not only that, they would rather lose, you know, going out than lose by tapping. Maybe it's a pride thing. Sorry, go ahead.
And you, sorry, I was like following on this, and you know, sometimes you could like, let's say we're 73 kilos in Canada, and the number one, number two, they do all the tournament, and then the country's like, okay, like we're gonna send number three to this one tournament, and it's like, well, that's my only chance. Like, I gotta prove myself.
Right.
And then maybe they like since it's their only chance, they're like, well, I need to take advantage of it.
Right.
That can be one of the outcomes.
Very interesting there. Now, in terms of, and I asked you this earlier on this question, how can judo athletes balance the demands of training and competition with their physical and mental health? You know, and what strategy can be used to prevent overtraining and burnout?
Well, I think I'm gonna like a little bit repeat myself for part of the answer. It's really to listen to your body, to have a good follow-up with the staff, so physio, nutrition, everyone, just to like keep everyone in the loop, and to have a proper planification with your coach. You know, you could be like, sometimes, of course, like you're gonna have big periods, but if you know that after this like 2-3 months of very intense periods where you go twice in Europe, for example, you're gonna get a week off, or like the coach is gonna adapt for it, then you know that can be motivating. So I think the biggest tip for myself that has been working pretty well is to have a balanced life. And that's partly why I'm happy to be doing so much school. It's because, especially when I was younger, let's say, for example, I was doing a lot of judo and it wasn't going super well at judo. Well, I still had school to help me think about other things.
Right.
And the same thing was true for school. I was doing a lot of exams. It wasn't going super well, but then I could go train, or I was tired of studying, and then I could go to training and like just release some stress. And I think just this balance of having another big part in your life, yes, it adds a lot of time, but it also helps balancing everything. And because otherwise you overthink stuff, you could be, well, I haven't done well in my last two tournaments, and then you're home and you're in bed and it's 3 a.m. and that's all you can think about. Versus if it's not going super well, but then you think, well, I have an exam, I got to study, then you're going to think about that. And that's really true. Like avoiding over focusing can really be helpful for like preventing just burnout, like mental burnout.
Sure.
In terms of the mental aspect, also, if you think that it's not going well, I think there's a lot of campaigns that are being done right now about talking with friends, family, professional staff. If you're struggling, they can help you find solution.
Right.
And yeah, like I think just a lot of communication with family, friends, staff can help physical and mental overtraining. Let's say it like this.
For sure. And if you don't mind, I have a follow-up here. It's
Yep.
the same subject, quite frankly. It's on the topic of mental health, but particularly within high performance sports. How is the topic of mental health and stigma addressed within high performance sports communities and judo in particular? To what extent is mental health openly discussed among athletes, coaches, and others involved, to foster a supportive and understanding environment?
Well, I think, as I said, a lot more initiatives are being like promoted
Right.
in the last years about to help mental health. Some initiatives that I've personally been not proposed, but that I've been introduced to at different levels. There's one from COC. It's called Game Plan, and that helps people with their post-life, like post-sports life. They're going to help you maybe place you, do networking, but they are going to also provide you with resources, so as a psychologist, to help you if you're struggling. But that's all around Canada. There's also the training facilities because we train in government facilities like the Institut National du Sport du Québec. These places also have tools on the spot to help you. They offer webinars, for example, to help you with mental health, or conferences, and they have the establishments to help you, and they really talk about it. But also, like each sports federation are also like providing you with the help with sport psychologists, for example, and they have access to doctors, and a lot of resources have been offered. One key part actually that I thought about was is about inclusion. Now being more and more promoted, because I mean everybody can have cannot feel comfortable being included in a sport, especially in sports. Some sports there's been there still is a lot of problems. So I think promoting inclusion is another good way of helping mental health of everybody.
Right on. And in terms of just another quick follow-up, in the last 10 years, would you say there's been more, and I think you've answered it already, the conversation has changed, right? In terms of mental health, in terms of the stigma, addressing the stigma has the stigma been addressed? I guess is what I'm asking. Well, from what you've seen.
I think when it comes to on personal experience, again, since I've been on the team, I think the coach, like when it comes to coaches, there hasn't been a lot more differences because I think they were very open. You know, they could see when someone was struggling. They were trying to help those people, and because at the end of the day, they want you to be at your best. And if you're not feeling right, if you have a down, then of course they're going to want to help you. And it goes, for example, with breaks, vacation, and stuff like that.
Sure.
I think one of the key aspect is really like how aware everyone is of mental problems now. And that, like, you know, you have athletes from every sport that have been coming out talking about just facing pressure, depressions,
Right.
like following the Olympics or following a big, like a good or bad performance once they're done their career. So I think people like the general public being aware of it forced the hand of higher people to like create programs and give resources to everyone, every athlete to progress in when they struggle.
For sure, yeah. I think having that support is integral, right, and important for these athletes. Now, speaking of a different form of on the physical side and recovery, how do recovery methods such as massage, stretching, and ice baths impact judo athletes' performance and injury risk? And what is the most effective way to implement these methods in a training program?
Well, I think most of these techniques have the more or less the same goal, which is first to prevent soreness, to relax the muscles after training, help with inflammation is another goal, but also prevent injuries. So, and I think the biggest goal is to prevent injury, of course, and accelerate recovery. Um, that's like in terms of what is the most effective way, of course, it's like after training or during a day of a break day. Because if you do it right before, like if you decide to have a massage a couple of hours before a big training, maybe your muscles are going to be a little bit too relaxed.
Mm.
So that's also something to factor in. But most of the time, you know, you're gonna like want after a big training, you're gonna want to stretch to really start the recovery at this point to help your muscles loosen a little bit. And like just on this note, not all of these techniques are necessarily bad before training. Like I just would like to bring a little precision in here because some sports like for us in judo, it's really important stretching as part of the warm up because you're gonna like if you're too tight, like for example, Newaza for some technicals, you're not gonna be as fluid, as fluid. Yeah, I'm gonna say it like that way. And yeah, so like sometimes it can be implemented for the training for the preparation, but most of the time it really helps recovering and preventing injury.
Right on. Can you do me a favor? Can you move
Yep.
over just a little bit this
Yes.
way? Yeah, sorry, because
My chair has been rolling
oh, okay,
for
okay.
like throughout the interview, and sometimes I look at myself, I'm like, oh no, I'm a little bit there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
sorry about that.
All good, man. No problem. I have just a few more questions for you, three
Yes.
more actually. This one is about doping. To what extent is the topic of doping openly discussed and understood within the judo community? That's within international competitors like yourself. And how prevalent are doping allegations and reprimands? How does this awareness contribute to promoting a culture of clean sports and fair competition among judoka and other combat sports athletes?
Well, that is probably the trickiest question to answer.
Sorry, I know.
Because
And I appreciate your honesty. Actually, when we were exchanging view, because I share these questions for you, and you told me straight up because the initial one was even more specific. And to be honest, the reason why I mentioned it is I've just been doing a lot of reading on doping and just kind of informing myself on it because it's it's prevalent in all sports and so on.
yeah.
And I was just curious to know within the judo community this question is essentially how prevalent is it and I mean it's only answer with what you're comfortable with. Obviously, I'm not trying to create any.
Oh, well, no, no worries. Well, I mean, of course, when you compete internationally, you want to believe that everybody is clean, everybody's at the same level. We start with the same, we compete on the same basics. Unfortunately, it's not always the case. So let's start with the part where you said like are people like being reprimanded and stuff like that. It's also like a tough one to say because depending on the country, sometimes the information is going to be promoted more, like not necessarily promoted more, but more easily available. I can think in Canada, for example, it's really easy to see if someone tested positive. Countries like France also, it's really like information is easily accessible versus other countries. Sometimes it can be a little bit harder. And where do I want to go with this? It's, you know, sometimes in the like in judo, you see this guy and he does amazing things, and next thing you know, he's out for like you don't see him for a year or two. And that's where the rumor mill starts. You're like, oh, like I heard he tested positive, and you hear a little bit like a little bit of gossip. So is it true? I don't know. I want to believe that it's not, and that the guy's just injured.
Sure.
For judo, I think one of the things that's pretty interesting, and there are very few actual cases that have been like made public or that are happening in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe one of the reason is that doping is not necessarily as beneficial, quote unquote, than in other sports. Because let's say, for example, in biking, if you bike and you dope, you're gonna have stronger legs, you're gonna have a better heart condition, so it's really gonna help you improve your time. In judo, you could be 10 times stronger. If technically you're not there, you could still be thrown in 5 seconds.
Sure.
And there's not going to be necessarily a benefit, or the benefit is not going to be as big. But just to maybe conclude a little bit on the positive note, I think in terms of like programs and promotion, I think the IGF, so the International Judo Federation, have been partnering with WADA, so the International Doping Agency, to try to promote clean sport. They have also released, like I think it was last week actually, I was reading about it, anti-doping webinars. So they really want to promote self-sport, and there's random testing in judo in tournaments mostly. And I think every country is responsible for doing testing in their own country.
Right on, right on. What is the impact of technology on judo training and performance, and how can coaches and athletes leverage advanced? Pardon me, let me read that. What is the impact of technology on judo training and performance, and how can coaches and athletes leverage advances in sports science to gain a competitive advantage? This one's a little different than the first one, I think.
Well, I think just like to come back a little bit to what I talked at the beginning, there's a lot of like little technologies or little like things that have been implemented in our routine. Like I think like I mentioned video watching at the beginning. I mentioned the heart monitors. That's stuff that didn't exist necessarily 50 years ago. Or you know, with sports scientists, they can do graphs of performance, like just measuring powers and stuff like that. And I think, is it all revolutionary? Is it going to change the way we train? No, but I think all of those little things can make you improve 1-2% maybe. And I think that's where it gets interesting, because there are so many little things that you can do, that you can change to optimize the way you train, to help you just to adapt your training, or to help you prepare better. That if you add up all of those old techniques that are like 1-2%, the increase overall can be 10, 15, 20%. So I think technology as a whole has, like, without saying that it's been like groundbreaking or nothing, I think it brought a lot of small little things, and I think it's going to keep bringing up more and more things to be able to make you perform better.
I've been thinking about this concept of using artificial intelligence. Like, are you familiar with Chat GPT? I'm sure you are.
Yes.
You've heard of it. And it's like I'm wondering, like, what if you use artificial intelligence to kind of like say you put as much information, on your opponents, right? All your opponents, and you extract and analyze all their matches, how they won, because all this data and stats obviously are available to kind of plan out a strategy. I know I sound crazy,
Well,
but
no,
like,
actually, that's like I think in a sport like a mixed martial arts where there's like it's more or boxing where it's more professional and where there's a lot of information available, you can probably like I don't think that's a crazy idea. I think it's actually pretty smart.
yeah, I mean, it's something to play with, right? Because there's all these data points, and you think about like how AI could be of assistance to this particular sport or that sport, and because all the stats are there, if you build a model and you kind of, I mean, it's
Yeah, and
we're at a very early stage to all of these things, but I wouldn't be surprised because I think there is one site called Tech Judo Data. Jeez, I forgot the name.
Yeah,
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, judo data, I think.
Yeah, and they have all sorts
Yeah.
of great information, a treasure trove of data, kind of giving you the full picture from a data analysis of what happened at a tournament, who won. But if you extrapolate and take that and you kind of feed it certain prompts, I kind of wonder, and I know I'm getting way into this is all fiction at the moment, but it's like as a way to kind of do some sort of predictive analysis of what to expect. But then again, all these things go out the window, because anything can happen, right? Anyone can win on any day if they show up a certain way. But I have two more questions for you. What are the most common injuries in judo, and how can coaches and athletes work together to prevent and manage these injuries throughout an athlete's career? I know this is another big question, but I also want to ask, it almost seems like injuries are inevitable in this sport and other sports. But I mean, judo in particular, it seems, what do you think of that statement? Is that too harsh of a statement?
Well, I think because the sport requires all the part of our body, like both standing on the ground, because it's a very dynamic sport, and because you're actually fighting someone, like you're directly fighting something that you don't control. I think that's why there are a lot of injuries in judo. You take a sport, I keep talking about biking, but like if you bike, you kind of know what are the risks. Like if, for example, it's wet outside, if there's a lot of people around, that's a danger. So you know what to expect, and the injuries are mostly going to be on your legs. Versus in judo, because you're fighting someone else and there's a lot of stuff that is unpredictable. That's why I think there are a lot of injuries. As far as what are the major ones, I think in terms of minor injuries, you can have, for example, your fingers. I think everybody sprained all of their fingers.
All of their fingers, eh?
Yeah, like all of like personally, like thumbs, the little ones, the big one, all of them. That's very common. I think concussions, sadly, we talked about it a little bit earlier, they're pretty common. Like even if it's like a small one, they can happen pretty often. And in terms of major one, the one that I've seen quite a lot would be the ACL and the like the one that I have dislocated shoulder. Because again, it's you move your arms everywhere and you use your own body. So sometimes just an awkward fall, just like trying to prevent a fall, can actually lead to an injury. And in terms of what you can do to prevent those injuries, I think that's been a recurring theme throughout this interview. I think it's through proper education of learning how to fall and actually taking throws when you're in practice. Yes, you want to train as hard as possible, but sometimes it's easier to just let yourself go, fall, stand up, and then fight again than to actually try to dodge in the air and maybe have an injury.
Right.
The other three things that I can think of are adapting training when you're tired. So I think when you are like when your brain is more tired, your body is more tired, you're less responsive, and that's where the injuries can occur more when you're less sharp. And actually, I had another one, not two. Healthy lifestyles, sleep, very important. 3 meals a day. It's the basics. Don't like go at a bar all night and go training the morning after. That's probably not the good way. Proper hydration. So those are all the little things. Of course, it can still happen. Accidents happen. Someone behind you can fall when you're in training, and you cannot do anything about it. But those little things that I mentioned are probably the easiest things to implement in your routine to prevent injuries.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all these great answers, Antoine. My last one for you is obviously on in a couple of weeks you'll be going to Santo Domingo for the Pan American Open. What are your plans in the lead up for that? What are you working on, and how are you feeling going into this next tournament?
Well, in terms of how I'm feeling, I think I'm feeling good. I think my physical shape is pretty good. Mentally, I'm there, even though the last couple of tournaments have not been as good as I wanted. I think I've done a lot of good things in those tournaments to know where I am, and like that it just didn't work out for me. And I think I've been training hard enough to know that like I'm doing the right things. It just need to like at some point it's gonna block, and I know it. And for training, actually, there's a national camp starting Monday. So everyone from around the country is going to be there, but also a couple of people from other countries are going to come. So that's what I'm planning. Like that's going to be the preparation, just to get as many fights as possible. I don't think as close to a tournament you want to start to do crazy new things. It's just doing what you're good at, getting like just working hard, and you won't like not changing your routine. It's when you have long times like a month, 2 months, 3 months, that's where you can like do more like specific preparation. But in terms of when a tournament is very close, you just really want to focus on what you're good at and getting as ready as you can.
How many I don't know if you know this info, but how many people are they expecting to show up?
That's a very
rough estimate. Rough estimate.
I wouldn't be surprised if one night were like 100 people in that.
Wow.
And how,
sorry, go ahead.
I say this, I don't know if I'm actually right, but I would, like, because sometimes we've been like 50 people on the mat. So if you had other provinces or people from outside.
Very cool. And you said some folks from Europe are coming as well?
Yes, I don't have all the details. I know that like all around the world, there's going to be some American people. There's going to be some Slovenian people. I think some people from France.
Wow.
Maybe Japanese. But I don't know everybody, of course. But I think it's going to be an interesting training.
Very cool, man. Well, thank you very much for your time and all your answers. And if you can just stand by, I'm going to end the interview here. But thank you very much. And
well, thank you for having me. It was a really interesting chat.
Yes, I enjoyed it as well.